you know.
Yeah.
And like you say, near the end of the book, you give an outline that this social harmful thinking pattern is like a harmful virus in this time of, is a lot of talking about viruses. And so
yes, a lot of viruses.
it's a quite a general saying, like a virus, but how do you think this virus is spreading? Through what channels or through what kind of means it's like is promoted?
Well, yeah, there's a virus. It becomes like a virus. In other words, it harms society, yeah? But it's caused by a thinking pattern. And some people can see the damage that comes with this thinking pattern, and others can't. But this thinking pattern is well established within the university system and legislation, and we already have quite a lot of laws that follow this thinking pattern and are creating social damage, which is why in the data I see, you know, more damage in every generation, because in the laws themselves we've created laws that look nice, they look compassionate, they look helpful for one group of people, but they create a lot of damage for other groups of people. Mm. And this form of legislation is well established within the West now by activism, and it's highly, and our nations are decaying as a result, and our national debts are going up rapidly, paying for all the damage. But you know, you have to go back and you have to think about what rights are we, if we're living in a community, you might say, what rights are we kind of bestowed upon us naturally, and what rights are not, you know, are created by politicians. And when they create rights which aren't for one group of people, then that group of people actually get more rights than everybody else. It's not that they get equal rights, because everybody got equal rights within natural rights, yeah? So everybody got a natural right to try to earn a living, for example, or, you know, to use their talents, or everybody's a natural right to try to build a family, you know, and no one should say you can't do so. So you have these kind of natural rights, but there are political created rights, and you know, you have to question, are there any natural rights for transgendered individuals? You know, specifically just for transgendered. I mean, that, you know, does Mother Nature have a set of rights for transgendered individuals who are not a natural, you know, outcome, you might say? They're psychologically hurt people or confused people or whatever. No, there's no natural rights, extra natural rights for transgendered. So, you know, the only way you can give them some rights is to invent them. And politicians are very good at inventing them. The trouble is, then they have more rights than everybody else, and then they can go around telling everybody to be quiet, or, you know, or you get fired because you say something I don't like, or, you know, and they have far more rights than everybody else. And then you have the rule of the 0.5% of the population over everybody else, and it's like crazy, you know. Nobody has a right to have extra rights, but the politicians create them. And you know, what kind of rights do we lose, you know, in transgender theory? I mean, you know, we lose some. We can come back to that later. But when you create extra rights, then you start to warp the social fabric, and people start to feel, well, you know, I can't even say a man is a man just because he's cut off his penis. You know, it's like, well, he's still a man. All his DNA is man. And
Stephen, do you think if like you showed a lot of consequences, but do you think this is conscious for many people? Because it seems for me it's like in the Alps, if you know what is if you avalanche is coming, you know.
Yeah.
There's maybe a small cause, like a little stone is hitting the snow, and suddenly a big, also first it starts small, avalanche, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and the people basically cannot escape anymore. They are getting, the consequences are grave and maybe losing their life. And it seems to me that this kind of consequences of this kind of transgender, like I don't know how many transgender types we have now, maybe 30 or more already, or like the consequences if we would realize in the real hurtful way, like not just listening to it and hearing it, but really feeling it, really experience it as a society, like we have not, whatever consequences. Do you think they still would do this kind of laws, what really are very harmful, basically? Even if
well, the trouble is always seeing the damage, and to see it and feel it and to understand it. And unless you personally read these things and you understand, you listen to the stories of these, for example, of these young people who accidentally transitioned and now regret it, and now are waking up to what they've done, you know, hair loss and infertile and, you know, difficult health problems still and all kinds of things. And you can feel sad, unless you can feel some sadness and you can read up on the students who, you know, girl students who feel like they can't run anymore, or unless you're willing to do the work to see the damage. It's very hard. And some people see the damage, and some people are caught up because the media is so intent of saying you have to have compassion on this 0.5% of the population. Now, there are lots of people in society who are living tragic lives. There's lots of people who, for example, a large number of both boys and girls are sexually abused, large numbers of people growing up struggling without a father. There's all kinds of really big social problems which need our real compassion, you know, how can we solve this? How can we fix this? And no one says anything about compassion for these people, you might say. No one deals with this and say, how can we offer counseling? How can we offer male mentoring for boys? How can we say, which would actually bring about a positive, you know, we're asked to have compassion for this tiny group of people who need our compassion, but it doesn't mean that you have to create far more damage by creating new laws. Now, by helping young boys to become, you know, fatherless boys to grow up, and you won't create damage. And by helping people of sex, you won't create damage. But by passing this transgender legislation, you create damage. And you have to understand why there's a difference, and why is the media only focusing on that tiny group and not upon everybody else. So you start to see a game is being played, and the game is, how can we get more power into society, into the hands of politicians, which is what transgenderism does, and how can we also cause society to decay? And you start to see a game being played by the universities and various groups of people. And to understand that game and how it's played and why it's happening is very important. But you have to look at the damage. And if you refuse to look at the damage, then you can have, you know, you can get taken away by the media. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's very important, Stephen, what you say. And perhaps we can, unless you have some very important points, what you want to share now, I think we have to make a conclusion. But
can I?
Yeah,
because
sure.
you mentioned, because I said I'd like to talk about the damage before I talk about the way the damage is implemented into society.
Yeah. Okay.
So the transgender theory comes under, you know, what I would call under a body of thought which is called cultural Marxism. Okay, and because Marxism, when it's applied, it was applied in Russia and China, and it brought about decay, and it brought about tyranny.
Okay.
And that's I would say economic Marxism. It's economic. It was an economic theory.
Yeah.
But the end result is created tragedy. And Russia is still trying to recover. East Europe is still trying to recover from all those years of stupid theory. And it was Marxist theory. Yeah. But you have to understand why Marxist theory works out badly. We have to understand why doesn't work. Even though it says, I want to help somebody, I want to have compassion, I want to have fairness, I want to have these things. Why does it cause damage? Yeah. So it's important to catch what goes wrong in Marxist theory. And trans theory is another one that follows Marxist thinking patterns, the Marxist framework. And therefore, you know, so if we quickly just go through like the thinking process that brought about the Russian Revolution, and then you can apply it to transgenderism, and you can see the parallels, yeah? So, so the first thing is basically this, you know, in the Russian Revolution, we have to care about the poor people. The poor are poor, and they're suffering. We need to focus on these poor, and how we're going to solve their problem, okay?
Okay.
So this is what we're going to do, yeah? And then we need to try to change the laws, change the political system, so that we help the poor. Okay, so they had a Russian Revolution. Change the political system. That will help the poor. We're going to distribute things and, you know, food fairly and things like that. That should help them, yeah? But in order to achieve that goal, they had to tell some believable lies. They had to tell some lies to society. They had to tell the, you know, people, various people, that poverty will be a thing of the past, yeah? Or the rich is keeping you poor. These kind of sentences, yeah? So we will end poverty. Did communism end poverty? No, it entrenched it into society, you know? And is it the rich keeping you poor? No, it wasn't. In many ways, it wasn't. It's the developmental stage of society. In the West, we developed and we raised many people out of poverty by proper application of various principles of education and development and freedom of speech and things like that. Whereas in Russia, it was, you know, so it wasn't the rich keeping them poor. It was a developmental stage that good principles would eventually get them out of. But they were told lies. They said, these are suffering. We need some political intervention. We will solve the problem. And this is what's causing the problem. And then the key thing here is to know that in order to make the lives better for this group of people, we have to take away some natural rights from these groups of people. We have to take away something they naturally are born with from this group. Okay, so the Russians took away the natural right of ownership. Yeah, so people have a natural right to own something. If you can own something, I can own something. We all have a right to ownership. Therefore, and they took away that right of ownership, or they took the right to make to use your talents to make a good living for your family. These are my talents. I developed them, but someone else says no, you can't use them because we say so, and that kind of took away the natural right of people to develop talent.
Yeah.
And so there was stagnation. So in order to help the poor, other people lost their natural rights. And when people lose but natural rights are there to bring about a wholesome society. They're there to bring about democratic norms. They're here to allow people to grow and look after their families and everything else. So when you take them away, you say, no, you can't look after, you can't own things. So people can't build up family wealth.
Okay.
You know, when they can't use their talents. If they, you know, in the Soviet Union, if you got wealthy from your talents, you were eventually seen to be a bourgeoisie. You were seen to be a rich person, and you were sent off to the gulags. And so you couldn't use your talent. And so, you know, so everybody said, well, what's the point? And so decay set in. Yeah. And then the government, having taken away the natural rights from people, had more power, and they could do what they like with their power. And they treated people, you know, with oppression and fear, and everybody was frightened of saying anything, you know.
I think they killed quite a lot of people.
They killed. And so, you know, and anybody who said, excuse me, this theory doesn't work. Communism economic doesn't work. We see too much damage although you care about the poor, you're creating so much damage with everybody else. Yeah. They are silenced. They're told to be, they said, it's not that it's not that the laws you don't care about. You're just a nasty person who doesn't care about the poor. No, no, it's not that. I care about the poor. It's the laws that are bad, and the laws are making everybody poor. No, 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 you're a nasty person who doesn't care about the poor. And so that's what happened in Russia. You know, if you said anything against the laws, you were seen as a nasty person towards other people, and you were killed or silent. Yeah. So it is this, once you see the damage, you go, oh, you know, the laws are creating damage. But under Marxism, no, you hate the people, that you don't like the people. You're uncompassionate. You're a nasty person who doesn't care about the people the laws are trying to help. So it's this twist, yeah? So you can apply this same theory. So it's a Marxist thought system to transgenderism. You can say, well, look, we have this group of people, they're transgendered, you know, actually, and we need legislators to solve their problem. They feel like cut off from society. They feel unfairly treated. We need to have compassion on them. We need to help them. Yeah, we need political interventions to solve their problem. Yeah, so they need drugs, they need operations, they need hate speech laws to protect them. And then you've got to tell some believable lies again. Yeah, these people are born in the body of the wrong sex, or gender confused children will commit suicide. Yeah, so everybody goes, oh yeah, well, this may be true, and then so believable lies are told, and legislators make laws. But in order to pass these laws, some ordinary rights, natural rights, have to be taken away from everybody else. Yeah, so freedom of speech is taken away. Protection for women in public spaces where body is important. So many natural rights are taken away. Scientists to be free from political, you know, interventions, yeah, things like this. So people lose natural rights, and because natural rights are there to create a healthy society, social decay sets in, which we've seen, you know, the damage. The sciences, and more children declare themselves to be transgender, and all kinds of decay sets in.
Yeah.
So then politicians who have set in motion that decay, who have taken away more natural rights, say we become more authoritarian. So they say we have a right to teach your children things which you parents don't like. Anybody who says, you know, for example, in England, somebody says that I refuse to call a trans woman, a man who's a woman got visited by the police, for example, as being a nasty person. So everybody starts to get frightened and of saying what they know to be true, yeah? Okay. And then those who see the extensive damage, like me or other people who see the damage that are being done to children and to science and everything, and say, I don't like these laws because they're creating much more damage than helping people, are called transphobic. Yeah, they're not called members of bourgeoisie, they're called transphobes who hate transphobes. No, transphobes need help, we have compassion, but if you make legislation based upon this stupid law, stupid theory, you will create far more damage. It's the laws I'm against. Yeah, and then decay sets in and no one can say anything. Just like in Russia, it just stagnated. Eventually, you know, of course, this is a slower process because it wasn't a violent revolution, but decay will set in. Our sciences will go to pot. Already our social sciences, in many of the papers in social sciences today are garbage. They are not worth the paper they're written on because they deny the importance of the family. The social sciences have said the marital family is not important, no more important than anything else. And they have gone off into some cuckoo land because the marital family is really important to children and children really benefit from it. And but they've gone into cuckoo land. And now the sciences will do the same. So people can't say anything, yeah? And politicians are frightened to change the laws and and the media keeps it that way, you know? It's really a problem, yeah? So you have to ask yourself, what can be done? You know, ultimately, what's the solution? And the solution is to throw trans theory away, just to throw it away, ultimately, because it damages everything it touches. Yeah.
You would say that the human rights for all people would be enough to protect everybody, or
Well, it
without?
depends what you call protection.
Yeah,
What do you call protection?
yeah,
You
for
know?
example, that you harass somebody because of his look or his behavior, and you protect people because of their nationality, because of their ethnic status. And this is one point what I was thinking, that human rights protect people anyway like this already. And the second point is, do you think that even like atheism, Marxism, cultural Marxism is like this is a strategy to destroy the West basically through this kind of theories?
Yes, yes. So cultural Marxism is being, you know, it's been this framework of we need compassion for this group. We have to change the laws. We have to take away natural rights from ordinary citizens, especially children. Children have lost their natural rights ever since the 1960s, when their natural right to life, for example, has been denied in abortion. You know, it's to help this group of people to have compassion on women with unwanted. We allow you to kill this, but we have to take away the natural right of the child. Yeah. And this has led to incredible social damage. It's not just affected the child, and it's created a real mess amongst the relationships between men and women. And one of the reasons for men and women finding it hard is because of the patterns of male-women behavior that came out of abortion law. But it's created, taking away the natural right of the child to protection and to life. You've created tremendous damage across society, so this thinking process has been active within the family, and now it's transferred to the individual since 1960s, and we've become so used to it. It's taken over our societies, and children are having worse outcomes because their natural rights have been taken away by their natural right to protection, their natural right to life, the natural right to know the love of both their parents. Have been violated in so many different laws now, and the children don't like it. They want to know they love of their two parents, and then they want to know they have a right to life, and they want a right to protection, and the state has no interest in protecting them. So their rights are taken away en masse, and we've created a very damaging child. Many children today, you know, they have to be, you know, in the 1900s, they had to be fearful about the diseases, you know, for example. You know, many children died in birth or died quite young. So the child coming out the womb had to be really fearful of all the diseases or problems. And today they have to be fearful of all the legislation which can hurt them. You know, no, you can't know the love of your father or biological mother, no, we might kill you. No, we might, you know, create you through IVF, and you might have permanent damage to your body because of that. You know, the poor child can be, you know, these laws allow them to be damaged. So ever since the 60s, we've allowed laws to take away natural rights from children. And it's just a continuation of that process. You know, here today, the natural right for protection is taken away. So we've developed a thinking pattern which is based upon this Marxist thought system, which says, for the sake of being compassionate to this group of people, the rest of us can't function properly and can't succeed. So how do you solve that problem is you have to get rid of this thinking pattern within the legislative framework. And the first thing you do is start with transgenderism, yeah? Because you can say, well, this will create far more damage, and we can't afford that. You know, we can't afford all that damage, and we don't have a natural right to create so much damage for the next generation. So we have a responsibility to create a better society, you know, and all we can do is get better at helping people with their mental problems, and, you know, and help them overcome their gender confusion. We become better at that. We will solve a lot of these problems. Yeah. So I would say, if you're going to create, you know, learn how to stamp out transgenderism. If you can learn to do that, then you can start to go back to all these other laws which create harm for children. And if we can learn, if we can gain the courage as adults, as human beings, to say, we refuse to let our society be damaged in this way. We want a better future for all our children. You know, then we have to be adults. We have to be, you know, act like that. So I would suggest, you know, repeal all the laws that suggest a woman become a man or a man can be. Just repeal them all. Just say we're not accepting that anymore. There's a trans man, a woman who became a man in England. She still has a womb. She got pregnant. She says, I'm the father. And she wants the courts in England to give her the title father, even though she has a womb.
Oh.
Okay, so what's the child meant to that? Think of that. I've got a mother. I've got a mother who thinks she's a man, and I have to call her father. Okay, so what's the poor child? You know, when he goes to school with his father, or the child goes to school with her father, and he says, this is my father, and the children look at him and say, no, it's your mother. You know, can you imagine the psychological negative effect on that child as they try to defend, this is my mother, this is my father, and all the children said, no, it's your mother. You know, can you imagine the psychological damage we do to the child? So you're ending up a really, you know, just by saying, well, I want to be nice to this woman who's become a man, we're okay to damage the children. And you can't do that. You can't do that. It's just not, it's not acceptable. It's not saying, it's just not fair. So I would suggest repeal all laws, repeal all the laws which, like, you know, you have to say preferred, I don't know, Austria, do you have to have preferred pronouns and things like that?
Yes, we have that already.
Yeah, so get them out, because there's no such thing as a third sex. There's two genders, male and female. And we have to admit that and kind of get rid of them. I would say that all doctors working with transgender people would have to follow Dr. Zucker's protocol, which he developed over the course of a long period of time, and he helped a lot of kids, and they shouldn't be, you know, allowed to transition until they're 21 at least, until they're old enough to understand the decisions. So I demand a strict following of protocols to help with the psychological issues of the children and let them grow out of it, which is what they'll do. I would demand that schools teach honestly about transgenderism. I would say talk about it being a mental illness or a psychological issue that affects young people who might have some other underlying issues, about the negative effects of transitioning. I would scare off as many people from pretending as possible to be transgender. I would, because this is what's happening right now, that they're pretending, and it's very dangerous to pretend right now. So I would teach the truth to children. I would for older people who want to transition, I would spend money on trying to get the best counseling protocols available, so that for older people who suffer from this psychological challenge, they can get help, and the best help. We will develop good protocols, and we'll help more and more of them. And if they ultimately want to transition, okay, but they're still the same sex as they were born with. Yeah. Okay. I would request that all professionals be free from this stupid theory, and they can get published because it's honest and not because it just follows some transgender theory. And I would encourage the media to maybe through tax breaks or something like that, to speak honestly, because right now in our media, we have soap operas with almost transgender in almost every soap opera, and they're all happy, and they all feel like, you know, they're all the same story, I've been socially bullied or whatever, and we're going to be happy there. And it's not like that. And so I would really recommend some honesty in the soap operas, and give tax breaks to companies that produce social media content or something which tells the honest truth. Because you can't go around telling a lie, you're hurting people. And we don't want to put in, I want to say, state censorship. But it really, it becomes so bad that
yeah, this moral set of values to really imply, because like to have a moral ethical standard, basically, which and I think this is the problem also, that many are excluding religion out of their life, because like you say, the law preventing you to do something, but actually religion is saying that you also have to watch out your thinking, because thinking is the stage where action follows, no?
Yeah.
And the state cannot influence your thinking, basically, but religion actually should like this unity of mind and body, and that your thinking is as a sound with your actions, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but because religion is excluded completely, or basically pushed back in the private area, so could this be also a reason why society is actually helpless against this kind of arguments? So,
Yes. Yes.
because otherwise you would have a set of values which really shows character and
Well, I
development.
don't know so much that, Johan. I mean, because, one can say, what principles do I follow, even though I have feelings, yeah? So, I have feelings towards women, but I'm married and I keep myself, and there's a certain sense of, for sure, moral discipline that comes from religion. But when you look at the children who are applying for the gender confusion, large numbers of them come from family backgrounds that are distressed, broken. And within that mix, many, for example, children just never see a healthy, don't see a healthy, they don't see a healthy role model of a woman, for example, or a man, And so males growing up are confused. They're more likely to go, I have no idea what it means to be a male. I get on with my mom, and maybe I'm more, but I have nothing to do with my father. I don't know how to relate with males at school. I'm struggling to relate with male. And so this just ties in, So in history when the marital family collapsed, because the marital family norms are typically built within religion, as you say. And when the religion collapses, the marital family norm collapses, and then children are more like, and so through history, at the end of the Roman Empire, we had all this gender confusion too. It's the end of a civilization. It's not that, there were more transgender people in our society than we thought, and now they can come out and say something. It's not like that. It means your society is coming to the end, and you are in a state of decay. The fact that you think that this is, the fact that you look at it and say, we're being more tolerant, etc., we're being helpful, we're being more kind to society, neglects the fact that you don't look at where these children are coming from, and the broken family issues, and that this is just a sign saying you've got too many broken families. You have too many dysfunctional families. Fix the family system. A lot of these children will grow up without this gender confusion, and you'll have a healthy society. That's the solution. And you can only rebuild it if you've got a reasonably healthy religious norm, not political norm, but a religious norm that says there's meaning to building a good family. There's importance to building, and it's important to stay through the difficulties and ups and downs, and you've got to have compassion, you've got to have empathy for each other, and gratitude and forgiveness, and all these religious values, which a politician can't tell you. You have to be forgiving to your wife. Can't say you have to be grateful to your wife. It's only religions can tell you that. And those things are the things that build marriages. So you can't politicize a marriage, but you still, as a human being, have to relate with a thought system which encourages you to have gratitude, encourages you to serve your wife, encourages you to forgive her. And that doesn't come from politicians. It doesn't come from political. And if you lose the religious values, then society crumbles. And that's what we're doing. So many people don't understand, the rules on forgiveness and how to forgive, or how to be grateful. It's just becoming harder and harder. And so as religious values disappear and replaced by political values,
Mm.
People say, oh, I get more meaning out of life by being compassionate to these groups of people rather than building a good family, because I don't know how to build a good family anymore. So,
Well, until now, I didn't hear about the cultural Marxism in the media or news that they said, "Oh,
cultural.
this is what is causing damage to our society." What do you think? What would make society more aware that there is this kind of thought system actually what is allowing this kind of natural rights to be taken away, as you say?
Yeah.
What do you
What would make
think?
people more aware?
Yeah, how to
And
make aware?
I wish I wish I knew, because if your media has been taken over by this,
Uh,
I mean, imagine in Russia, yeah,
mm,
the Russian system, although it was pathetic and it didn't work, was held in place by the media and the political, fear, and by the education system.
mm,
So these are the three things. If you educate people and say communism is great and America sucks and we're much better than America, and if you control the media and you control the education system and say, if somebody's saying something bad about the government, report them to, so your children were reporting you to the authorities, and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you couldn't speak to neighbors and all kinds of things. And so
mm,
the school system and the media and the politics all work together to keep it in place. And right now, the education system and the political system and the media are pretty much all supporting on these social issues. They support what we call the cultural Marxist viewpoint.
mm,
And anybody who says anything and says this is creating social damage is seen with, might lose their job, fearful, they
yeah,
get slandered, everything else. How to get out of that will take very brave people,
mm,
and people who are willing to stand up and work together and say we refuse to be taken over by this thought system, which will bring about the end of our democracies and and worse future for our children. And people have to be brave.
yeah, Stephen, that's a very good point. And do you think this could be also a reason because generally our society gets over sexualized, like young men, if they we have a good man friend like boys, they stick together, and in these days you many people just ask, oh, are they like real more than just boyfriend or
Yeah, yeah,
girls now.
yeah, yeah,
They are afraid to show their affection for each other just like normal girls do for their girlfriend,
yeah,
or
yeah,
they get immediately pushed in the corner. Maybe they have some
yeah,
kind of tendency or whatever. Do you
yeah,
think this is also one point in society that they define relationships only through sexual means?
yeah, yeah. No, that's what legislation does. When the government gets involved in something it shouldn't get involved in, redefining reality and redefining sex and all kinds of things, and then it has to, it has to try and force this new definition on the next generation. Yeah. So once you've told a lie, once you've said, oh, a man can become a woman, and then you have to force it onto the next generation, even if the parents are in horror. And so, and parents say, what are you teaching my children? And of course, it'd be nice to say, well, we're just teaching compassion. We're just teaching, tolerance or whatever. But then schools aren't doing that. They're reading school books to kindergarten children saying, you can become a member of the opposite sex. And think of little Johnny who comes home from, he's 5 years old, or little, Debbie, and she comes home from home and she finds she enjoys playing with the boys more than the girls. She says, well, Dad, I think I'm a boy. I mean, that sentence today can destroy her life.
That's true, yeah.
It can completely destroy her life. Suddenly, she says it to the teacher, I think I'm a boy, and suddenly all kinds of wheels start turning. And she might find and it was only because that day the girls didn't want to play with her, or her best friend didn't play with her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can set that child on a path of devastation.
Yeah.
And that's not just that. You got trying to build friendships with people of the same sex. A lot of girls touch each other. They out of friendship and joy and whatever. And now you have to say, well, my best friend touched me. Is she, gay? Is she after me? Maybe I should keep away. And it's a tragedy to bring this stuff into the healthy development of young people. It's a real pain. Yeah. And schools, in some schools here in England, I would estimate, from what I've read, that like 10%, just a few years ago, about 1 in every 20,000, 30,000 people expressed gender confusion, and about 1 in every 100, 1.5 in every 100 children kind of express gay, or express that strong gay feelings. Now it's close to 10%.
Really? Oh.
Now children are kind of playing a game, they kind of using it to, or because transgenders and gays are kind of untouchable and they look cool, and they're out there, they're on the cutting edge of society and things like this. And so kids are using it for all kinds of reasons to somehow say this. And it's extremely dangerous for them.
Yeah.
And this is all because legislation has pushed it into the schools. And parents just have no say, and it's and many parents associations across America are fighting back, and we know about in England, some Muslim communities and Jewish communities are in uproar and saying, you can't teach this to our children. It's not natural law. It's got nothing. These are psychologically damaged issue, but the government is pushing through, and. It's not listening. It's become very totalitarian, saying we know what's better for your children than you do.
Yeah.
And it's very, very dangerous. So it messes with the development of children immensely. Magazines start to play game. The positives. Only the positive is told. Only the positive.
Yeah.
And it's a deep tragedy.
Very big thing in all. It goes into all levels of society, television, art, and everything. Even true compassion, I would say, is actually different, not just to be in the status quo, not to leave the people as they are. This is not compassion for me. If I truly care about somebody and I see something is wrong, actually it is compassion to say what is right and what is wrong. This is, in my view, compassion. No? And otherwise it is actually just, I don't know, how would you call it, if somebody just want to leave you as you are, even if you are homeless, even if you are jobless, if you are, but you have compassion with him, and then go home and everything stays the same. I don't think it's really compassion. It's just pretending.
No, but there's a difference here, you see. There's a difference between individual compassion. I can have individual compassion. For example, I see somebody poor on the street. I can say, here's £100. It's my compassion. Or I can join a church and we can do fundraising, and I agree to be part of it from a voluntary perspective to help some group of people in society. There's a complete different thing between individual personal compassion and legislators passing laws on the basis of compassion, but laws that actually hurt other people. And your legislators should have to look first and say, does this law create more damage than good? Before you say, I apply compassion. And it has to look at right and wrong before you apply compassion. So, it doesn't help to be driven by, you have to look at the damage, and you have to say, this, rationally speaking, this will cause more damage, therefore I cannot apply that compassion here. I have to find another way to solve that problem. And if they have mental illness, how do I improve the ability of psychologists to help provide more funding to help them? But of course they get trapped by the lies of born in the wrong sex and things like that. But when you base a law upon compassion, but you refuse to look at for one group, and you refuse to look at the damage it creates as other group, then you have many more people who ultimately you have to feel compassion for. Yeah. How about the compassion for all the children who mistakenly transition now? How about compassion for all the people who have to give up sports, or all the women who are sexually abused when they shouldn't have been, or, you know, these new groups of people you get compassion for. And you have to look at those and say, no, I'm going to create far more groups of people who need our compassion. And
this
the
point
question
is, you said quite strongly, this looking at the damage is quite needs a lot of deep thinking and deep research, and looks like the society is not willing to take this time to
10
really
out of 10.
research. No? So
I mean, it doesn't take a couple of hours on the internet to look at the research and find the research on transgender children, the early research, or you can look at the videos of ex-transgender, you know, detransition people. It doesn't, you have to just want to do it. You don't have to, it doesn't take long to look for the damage that research on children of divorce, or, you know, or all these things. It's all out there. It's just a matter of willingness to say, is what I'm being told truthful? I want to make a truthful effort, and I'm going to look at the other side of the story. And people have to make effort, But to build up a viewpoint and say, well, I'm in my English class, I'm being asked to read a book, a modern book, which tells that marriage sucks, marriage is awful, marriages. So many English courses now have to read books which denigrate marriage, which put marriage down, show marriage in a bad light.
I understand,
But you have to look at the other side and say, well, what alternative do we have? Do they bring about worse outcomes rather than better? Yeah, marriage isn't perfect. There's all kinds of growth issues, development issues, but it's a growing institution. If you're willing to grow, you can get through it and make it beautiful. Yeah, but what's the alternative? Is it the alternative better? And the alternative is not, you know, single parenting is not a better outcome, or cohabitation is absolutely worse, because it's far more fragile and they break up far more than marriages, and the children get far more hurt. So people have to be willing to do their own research. And if they're not, then they will be trapped by the lies of the media and by the universities.
Yeah,
it's like saying our countries are the most racist. You know, students are taught, you know, that America is the most racist society on earth. Now you really have to go to China or India and you really understand what racism means.
Yeah.
You know, or what intolerance means, or, you know, they think this is the worst place for women, they're treated badly. No, go to Saudi Arabia, or
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and they're told this lie and they refuse to look. So you always have to look at the other side and see it today. But to somebody can say something and it sounds true, but to counter that, you probably might have to spend a whole week on the internet to say, oh, no, it's not true, you know.
Oh, well, this is homework to do, basically.
Yes, it is. It is.
For everybody to study and to really take it serious and be responsible, basically, no?
Yeah.
So, what would you say is a conclusion for this time, or have some other topics what you would like
No,
to?
I think we covered most things today. My wife is saying it's dinner time, and you know, I think we're well past the transgender issue, but we're in a very challenging time when we have a lot of laws which look like they aim to create fairness and tolerance and things like this, or compassion, but they actually create more groups of damaged people, more harm to many other people than the laws solve. And we refuse to understand that, and our societies are becoming very fragile. We're running out of money for schools, for police, for hospitals. We can't afford all this damage. And if if we don't reform this legislation, there is really and we can start with transgenders and see how we can do that. We can maybe move forward and build a better future for our children, for all, for all our children.
Yeah. Okay, Stephen, thank you very much. Peace TV got a lot of material to really and lots of information, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. It's lovely to see you, chat with you, and see your smile.
Okay.
Thank you very much.